Any views or opinions expressed on KUR are not necessarily those of Kutztown University, Kutztown University Student Government, Kutztown University Student Services Incorporated, KUR staff and management, or other affiliated organizations.
He fires, and it is caught for a touchdown. It's gone! And Giroux's got it!
And the Sixers have scored 9 in a row. Are you kidding me?
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Tyler Werner Show right here on Kutztown Radio, talking Philadelphia sports. As promised, we're going to get into some Philadelphia Eagles talk on today's show as we're going to look back on the 2013 season that I think was pretty fortunate that how the Eagles exceeded my expectations, at least, and I think the expectations of many. First off, I want to thank Anthony Marchetto for producing today's show as Mike Regensberger had a prior commitment today. So, we give him a round of applause for stepping in and producing the show today. A couple housekeeping things. I don't even know where that phrase came from, but I guess I'm going to use it. Last week, unfortunately, I tried to podcast the show, and I guess apparently it was getting done in the wrong room because it doesn't work here in the on-air studio room, but in the production room we got it fired up, going right now. So if you have something to do later, you're missing part of the show, you can check it. You can check it out on the Tyler Werner Show Facebook page. Pretty simple, facebook.com/Tyler Werner Show. So you can find it there. Or if you just want to hear it again, that's where it'll be. Furthermore, I forgot last week about giving my worst Super Bowl commercial ever. I got caught up in talking about the Super Bowl game itself, Russell Wilson, the Pro Bowl, amongst other things. So, it kind of slipped my mind. I hinted at giving that. So, without further ado, I'm gonna give you what I think is the worst Super Bowl commercial I've ever seen. And I think it was from 3 years ago, the Green Bay Packers when they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think it was from that Super Bowl. It was a Wendy's commercial. I think it was when they were advertising their new French fries or something at the time. I don't even know, because I may have eaten at Wendy's one time in my entire life, and I'm not a big Wendy's guy at all. I'm not a big fast food guy to begin with. But it was a commercial. They were advertising their fries, their new fries, I guess, and they started on this. It was filmed on this beach, I guess, on the West Coast, somewhere in California. And they had this big line, apparently, that apparently went to the East Coast somewhere. I don't even, I only saw the commercial one time, but it was that bad that I remember that they had this little container of French fries, these new Wendy's French fries, and they essentially, apparently, what they were doing was they were passing the container of French fries off to the next person in this line. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, this commercial is going on, like, how is this little container of French fries supposed to make it all the way to the other, the East Coast, let alone, off the beach? I mean, it was probably the dumbest commercial I've ever seen during a Super Bowl, and up there is one of the worst I've seen in my, pretty short lifetime thus far. But that's that. And if you want to get in on this discussion, if you want to, since I kind of forgot to give that away last week, you can call in 610-683-4859 and give perhaps what you think is the worst Super Bowl commercial you've ever seen. Amongst other things on this show that we'll talk about today, you can get in at 610-683-4859. So yeah, that's the worst Super Bowl commercial that I forgot to give away last week. Again, I mean, a little container of French fries, and I'm supposed to believe that oh yeah, everyone in that line is going to get a sample of that little container of French fries. But so that's that. We move on. The Flyers. We're going to talk a little Flyers a little later as well, as they head into the Olympic break, you want to call it. Even though a lot of there's only a few Flyers even playing on an Olympic team. A few weeks of rest, and fortunately, I mean they've been heading into this Olympic break on top of things, riding a 4-game win streak against a couple good teams. We'll talk Flyers later as they've looking strong heading into the break. Now, of course, Valentine's Day is later this Friday, and something I want to do on this show, every now and then. I obviously talk sports, really get down to business, but I also want to have fun on this show sometimes, and get the people listening involved. So, given that it's Valentine's Day later this Friday, it's just a few days away, we're gonna have a little fun. You can call in at 610-683-4859 and play a little game where if you have a spouse, you're married, whatever, or just a significant other, you can call in and you can tell us what's the best thing that your spouse ever did for you, like the best random act of kindness. Like, did she get you tickets to a big game that you wanted to see, or he open to the women out here to call. So now I realize that not everybody out there listening has a spouse or whatever, is married, whatever. You might be a single guy out there, and so you can still play this game and instead play what we call Rip the X. Now I know that's that sounds a little, but we want you to keep it clean. But I'll even give you an example of how I would play Rip Your Ex. Yeah, so one day I dated this girl maybe 5 years ago, and the first time we went to make out in the car. That's as far as it went, fortunately. She had this breath that reeked of like she ate a big bowl of Brussels sprouts, and I don't know if anybody has had a similar experience like that, but I managed to just suck it up and not let it be known that that's the kind of breath that I was getting from her so that's that. And furthermore, if it matters, she broke up with me on Facebook eventually, so I'd like to say that that some things like that happen for the better. But yeah, that's my little example of Rip Your Ex. So you can do that too on this show. It's 610-683-4859. So yeah, we'll have some fun here on Valentine's Day. Anthony, I got to ask you, as you get yourself set up there with the microphone. Do you have any input on this little game here?
I think it's kind of creative, and a little spin to it that you could put is if people would call in and maybe go with the sports angle of what their ex did. So is there someone out there that possibly their spouse ended up buying them tickets to a big game or anything like that? That's the kind of spin I'd go. Keep it sports related, and bashing your ex, go for it.
Right? Yeah. Obviously keep it clean, but yeah. I mean, do you would you like to play this game? Give another example. I don't know what your status is.
Off the top of my head, probably should not be getting into anything just to keep it FCC regulated. So I'm gonna have to bow out and pass on the entire game. But different time, different day, stories could be told.
Okay, well, so we'll leave it at that. But again, you can call in and you can play this little rendition of Valentine's Week edition here on the Tyler Werner Show. So without further ado, let's get down to the business, the sports business today. Obviously, some of the big stories coming out nationally this week is the Michael Sam NFL prospect. He's going to be in the draft. He's projected to be a mid-round pick. He came out earlier this week and essentially became they're dubbing him as the first potential openly homosexual NFL player. Essentially, that's what they're saying. He came out and he said that this is who I am, and credit to his college team that he's been playing with, because apparently they've known for a long time now that he was openly homosexual, and they've managed to keep it to themselves. They didn't make it a big deal, and I think that's where this whole thing should be going. That eventually, now that we're we can evolve here as a society when it comes to homosexuality, and just realize that it's that's who some people are, and it's that's just how nature works, and it's okay for people to have a different preference than most people, and play football or whatever, and be in a professional locker room. So I give credit to Michael Sam. He decided to come out this past week and discuss that, and obviously it's going to get a lot of publicity. Whichever team would decide to draft him, it's going to create some publicity. But that's how it is when it comes to something like this. And I think the idea here is that eventually, him coming out and being the first openly homosexual NFL player, will pave the way for it not to be such a big deal in the future. And I look at that as a good thing. Now the other story that's been kind of on ESPN the other night when I was watching, it was being alternated between Michael Sam, was Marcus Smart, who was a not Maxwell Smart from the old TV series Get Smart. No, Marcus Smart in college basketball, who during an away game, apparently there was a little bit of a not a scuffle, but he shoved a fan after a fan had something not so nice to say. They had there was some microphone that picked up part of it. All we can really hear of it or talk about. But to me, that's not the issue here, though. The fact that Marcus Smart shoved a fan, I'm not going to say this guy shouldn't, has no future now or whatever. He's got some growing. I mean, he's a 19-year-old college basketball player that shoved a fan. But I think where the issue lies is that you got to learn to control your emotions, and there's two different kinds of people here in this situation. There's those in the spotlight, and then those that pay to see those in the spotlight. And I think Marcus Smart has to learn that he can't let the fans, he can't let away fans or whatever, fans of the other team, get to him like that. You have to worry about what's going on in the court. You can't let a guy like that. You can't just let a rampant fan like that of the other team get to you like that. I think that's about, and I think that's what our coaches, our teachers out there, our parents, and coaches, I think, need to teach these athletes, especially these young athletes and children. You got to learn. You got to learn not to allow some random remarks like that from the fans get to you like that. You just got to worry about playing. You just got to worry about playing the game and not worry about fans saying remarks like that. Even though I'm not advocating whatever the fan said and his actions. I'm at, you just got to know, I think, as a professional athlete or a college athlete, a hopeful professional athlete, that you can't be saying, you can't be, so affected by that. To me, it's kind of like road rage. You can't, like some people out there on the road driving, it's just like, the littlest things can get to some people, and you just want to jam on the horn or whatever. Some people may want to, resort to flicking people off or whatever. But yeah, I think it's like road rage out there when it's kind of like the same thing when you're on a basketball court or on a football field. You just got to learn not to let, stupid little things get to you. And, if I were out there on a basketball court or whatever in a college atmosphere, I would think that I would just say, this guy is some fan of the team we're playing against, first of all. Of course I'm the bad guy. Of course we're like the bad guy to him. So I'm going to, I just made a good play or whatever, disallowed a basket, whatever. I'm just going to smile and, I just denied the player of your team, a basket or whatever. So that's the way I look at it. 610-683-4859. I want to hear your thoughts out there, you listeners out there, right here during your lunch hour or whatever. What do you think of the whole Michael Sam coming out and being proud to that he's going to be the perhaps the first openly homosexual NFL player. Well, I would hope that he'd get drafted. He's projected to be a mid-round pick. His stock could fall a little bit only because it could be a distraction with the publicity and etc. But that's just how it is. And I in the long run, it's only a good thing in my opinion. So, and then of course Marcus Smart. Hear your thoughts on that. We got a break coming up in just a moment. So, as we come back, we're gonna get into the Philadelphia Eagles talk, the reflection back in the 2013 season, as I stated earlier. So, without further ado, we will head to a break here. It is the Tyler Werner Show, and it's right here on Kutztown Radio.
The following is KUR's mission. The purpose of KUR is to provide a means of student training and experience in radio broadcasting, to provide a means of entertainment and information for the student body and community, to serve the public interest, and to be an instrument of expression for student, faculty, and community opinion in accordance with the rules of the Federal Communications Commission and KU policy. If ever you, as the public, should have any questions or comments about our mission, feel free to contact us through our website, kur.kutztown.edu. There you'll find a whole host of ways to contact us via our Facebook, Twitter, email, or phone numbers. Thanks for listening to the radio voice of Kutztown University, KUR.
Hello, this is Michael Douglas. Pneumonia can be dangerous, especially for older people and for those who have diseases like asthma, emphysema, or chronic bronchitis. Fortunately, there's a vaccine that can immunize people against one of the most common forms of pneumonia. If you're over 60 or have a chronic lung disease, ask your doctor whether a pneumonia vaccine would be right for you. It could protect you from a serious illness or even save your life.
A message from the Will Rogers Institute. Visit us at wrinstitute.org.
It's 12:20 right here on the Tyler Werner Show on Kutztown Radio. 610-683-4859 is the number to get in. And the Facebook page, again, facebook.com/Tyler Werner Show. That's where you can, post any random thoughts you may have. And of course, check out the podcasts of the show. Today's podcast, again, unfortunately, is getting fired up right now. So you can check that out later on the Facebook page. So, the Eagles 2013 season. Heading into the season, the way I looked at it was, to me this is like an extended, it was a super preseason for 2014 and beyond here in the Chip Kelly regime. I didn't, I realistically, I expected, they win 6-7 games, that'll be fine. All the transition heading into this year, the completely revamped staff, obviously a pretty new defense. Only a few mainstays were kept, were carried over from the Andy Reid regime into this new regime on defense, and some Jeremy Maclin was missing, obviously, from this season. So heading into the season, I thought, 6 or 7 wins would be perfectly fine, and most people would have expected that would have meant 4th place in the NFC East once again, but as we'd find out, that would be far from what happened. Now, early on in the season, of course, week 1 against the Washington Redskins, RG3 makes his return, and many would argue that he wasn't quite ready to make his return. He had no preseason, and the Eagles' offense was, just running on all cylinders that game, especially in the first half. Got out to a big lead, obviously, and kind of Monday night, or first game of the season. They took the NFL by storm that night, and the defense at the end. I think they were in prevent mode in that game later in the game, but they held on to the win there, even though things got a little shaky. But little did we know then that the Washington Redskins would not win that many games anyway. So, at the time, though, you're thinking, most likely Washington is the team that's going to win this division. But that, as we'd learn later on, that's far from what was going to happen. Now, next few weeks after that, the Eagles seemed to, come back down to earth a little bit. We kind of came back down from cloud 9. And, also I want to mention, too, that these first 3 games of the season, we're in a tight 11-day window. For a new regime like this, a rookie head coach in the NFL, that's pretty, that's got to be interesting to, to have to do that. Get your players ready to play 3 games in 11 days in this league. But, they had a, pretty high-scoring game against the San Diego Chargers. Michael Vick had somewhat of a career day, throwing for a lot of yards that game. And I think what it came down to in that game, and what would be the first Eagles loss of the season, was, clock management. Chip Kelly insists on, his hurry-up offense and whatnot. And, throughout the season, sometimes it came back to bite him a little bit, clock management. To me, the way I look at it is that they could have milked the clock in that game. They insisted on just taking it down and score, as quickly as they can. Whereas if they, Chip Kelly maybe would have, stretched things out a little more. And this going forward, I think this is something that he's hopefully going to learn in the future. Had they stretched the clock out a little bit more, let things run down, San Diego perhaps would not have gone down and had enough time to score and essentially win the game. I think that's what it came down to. Especially when early on in the season, the Eagles' defense was not very good as, we would have expected. Or as we all expected, definitely early on in the season, the Eagles' defense was not playing well, and we all expected that. The next week, of course, Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs on Thursday Night Football Andy Reid makes his return to Philadelphia in the form of being the Kansas City Chiefs head coach, and in my opinion, not having to do much to beat the Eagles that night. That was a pretty bad night from Michael Vick. I remember, a couple interceptions that looked, really seemed like he telegraphed it. Even though early on in the season, before Michael Vick got hurt, I think overall he played pretty well. before he pulled his hamstring. But that game, the defense kept them in it pretty early on, and the Eagles couldn't really respond, and they got shut down that game, and so okay, 1-2, it's not too bad. Then they go to play Denver in Denver. I remember Peyton Manning kind of joked that they were coming off a Monday Night Football game heading into that game against the Eagles. I remember him joking like it's nice of the NFL to give the Eagles 10 days of rest or whatever, and give us 6. That's how it works out. I mean, then again, the Eagles played their first 3 games in an 11-day span. But the thing is, Peyton Manning, he doesn't need 6 days to prepare against the Philadelphia Eagles, and that was proven when the Eagles got their clocks cleaned in that game. And what was it? It was like 51-16 or something like that. And the Broncos easily had their way with the Eagles that day, and it's that's that. So at this point, I mean, the defense in that game looked like they laid down, especially in the third quarter. And at times it looked like they weren't even trying, and so things were looking a little bleak at that time. But then they had another divisional game, the Giants at home. This was it was the Giants. Game 5. They come out pretty strong. Michael Vick plays pretty well, and pulls his hamstring late in the second quarter, and then essentially, which we expected at some point to happen, that Michael Vick was going to get hurt. But then, eventually, out comes Nick Foles. But yeah, I mean, Nick Foles comes out and, he finishes the job. And of course, at one point, I mean, the Eagles were down, I think, in the third quarter against the Giants that game. And, but Nick Foles manages to, lead them on route to victory. 2-3 at that point. And then next week against Tampa Bay, of course, in the Andy Reid regime, when Nick Foles was playing, that was his only win in the 2012 season, when the Eagles were just, having an absolutely horrible season. So, Nick Foles leads them to a nice win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who were winless at the time. Although they could have, they were in a lot of competitive games. The Eagles managed to get the win there. And, suddenly, Nick Foles is looking pretty well. Playing pretty well, so far. Although Michael Vick, no, he's not. He wasn't ready to come back. I'm trying to get my timeline straight here. They get to 3-3. So all right, things are going better here. Then they got the Dallas Cowboys. The first affair with the Dallas Cowboys of the season. Heading into that week, I'm thinking, Nick Foles is playing pretty well. It was a winning formula, and he comes out and, he doesn't have quite a good game at all. No interceptions or anything. That would be Matt Barkley's job to take care of. When he threw, for all intents and purposes, he threw like 4 interceptions that game. So he would take care of that job. Nick Foles, he was very gun shy in that game. He did, I don't know. And I talked about this before when I did my air check show / pilot edition. Quite a clunker of a game there. The Eagles defense actually really showing up in that game, and which was the first game of many where they really show up, and really hold teams below 20 points and etc. But yeah, the Eagles defense really keeping the Cowboys offense under control in this game, and which is ironic because not long before that the Cowboys were in a huge shootout with the Denver Broncos. So that was a little ironic, but the Eagles can't mount any offense there. Furthermore, the next week against the Giants again, their second game with the Giants. Again, they just come out completely flat on offense. And, albeit they they put up a field goal or two. I don't even remember. And again, the defense playing at the same level that they did the week before and holding the Giants under 20 points. And at this point, okay, now they're 3-5. But at this point in the season, things get really interesting. Jeffrey Lurie comes out, the owner of the team that week, and says we need a guy to step up and be our quarterback. And of course that week against the Giants, that was when Michael Vick came back and re-aggravated his hamstring. Wasn't ready to come back on it that soon, I guess. And then we had Matt Barkley for the rest of the game. So, and we saw that game didn't go too well either on offense. So, but yeah, they come out flat in that game too. And at this point, Jeffrey Lurie comes out and says we need a guy, whether we draft somebody or whether it's on this team, to step up and be the franchise quarterback. It was worded somewhat like that. And essentially, at that point, fortunes started to turn around for the Eagles season, because at that point, I'm starting to wonder, and probably a lot of other fans out there starting to wonder, are the players buying into Chip Kelly and this new regime, etc. That was the midpoint of the season, and next week they come out against what I believe was the Packers. I got to get the schedule up here, but essentially they come out against Let me check here. I don't know if it's the Redskins or the Packers. Get my timeline mixed up here. They had to. Okay, no, it was the Raiders. How could I forget the Raiders game? When Nick Foles has what some say was statistically the greatest quarterback performance ever. I don't know. It was so easy to forget that game for whatever reason, but the Eagles, out of nowhere, after struggling offensively of epic proportions, comes out, and Nick Foles throws 7 touchdown passes that game, and he probably could have thrown 3 more, but Chip Kelly kind of doing the right thing. We're going to rest our starters the rest of the game. I mean, it was easy to see why they do that. I mean, they had the game in the bag. Riley Cooper, coming to life here after having an abysmal first half of the season for the most part, really comes out and catches 3 touchdown passes, and all of a sudden it's like, where did that come from? And historically the Eagles have had trouble with the Raiders. They travel 3,000 miles on the road over to Oakland, and they destroy them, and it's like, all right, that was interesting. Maybe Chip Kelly has his offensive struggles that have been hampering them as of late. Maybe things are looking up again. And they head into Green Bay, which of course Aaron Rodgers was not playing that game due to his collarbone injury. The Eagles get the win there. Clay Matthews also was banged up that game. He had his hand all wrapped up. But, nevertheless, the Eagles came out with the win, 27-13. And again, defense playing pretty well, as they had, the past several weeks before that. And here they stand at 5-5. One more game before the bye week. Redskins versus the Eagles again, the rematch. A lot of people said, the revenge factor in this game we got. That could be a factor here. And a lot of people thought, the Redskins were going to beat the Eagles and get the revenge. And I'm thinking, the revenge factor, I think, had evaporated at that point. That's a little long. I mean, week 1, and then that was 10 weeks later. I didn't think anything of the revenge factor. And, again, quite frankly, we had Nick Foles in there playing quarterback. Things were different. It was a different part of the season. And it was just too I didn't buy into the revenge factor in that game. And the Eagles came out and played well again, and they won 24-16. Towards the end of the game, I mean, Redskins were making a comeback, but nevertheless, the Eagles held on. They pick off RG3 in the red zone, and that would clinch the game as they would head into the bye, which carry them through Thanksgiving. They'd be riding a 3-game win streak heading into the bye, and with a winning record, 6-5. And at that point in the season, the Cowboys, I believe, were also at the same record. December 1st, the Eagles come back, 5 games remaining. And, at that point I'm thinking, you know what, the Eagles should win this division now, because, they've been showing promise the few weeks before. But the Cowboys were just, clearly they were showing that they are a flimsy football team. And, sorry if I offend any Dallas Cowboys fans out there, but, I mean, that's just the bottom line. I mean, what, this is your third straight 8-8 season. Again, I don't know. That's how it would turn out in the month of December, as it is. But I'm thinking at this point, the Eagles are playing good football. Clearly, their offensive struggles are in the rear view, as well as their, big losses to the Denver Broncos, etc. But they had a tough test on December 1st when they had to face the Arizona Cardinals. Even though they're coming off the bye, fortunately for them, and they come out and they win a close game, 24-21 over the Arizona Cardinals, who that would finish the season 10-6, missing the playoffs. Obviously, due to being in such a tough division, probably the best division in football. So they come out and the Eagles win that game, and then you had the winter thriller against the Lions at home, where the snow, they had this big snowstorm. You could barely see anything. It was quite an interesting game to watch on TV, and the credit definitely goes to the technical people on the network there that had to light up the numbers that you couldn't really see on the field at all, and etc. But the Eagles come out and they win that game in a thrilling fashion. I mean, they were down in that game. Basically, in that game, you were throwing all your plans out the window, because the way this storm was, you just had to, kind of just make it up as you go. Figure out how to run in this snow that was on the ground, this half foot of snow. And the Eagles ended up doing just that, especially late in the game. The Eagles' defense coming up big in that game, obviously, holding the Lions for the most part, even though it was, rather tough to throw the ball, and etc. But, late in the game, LaShawn McCoy has, a career day. Obviously, that was the key to victory. And it's quite a spectacle to watch. And, the Eagles late in the game just really came up with the way to win there. And, they were riding high at that point at 8-5. Now, coming up on another break, we'll finish up with this little timeline of events here. 610-683-4859 is the number to get in, right here on the Tyler Werner Show on Kutztown Radio.
It's Telescopic Topics, a look into the world above us.
This is Allison Lawrence. I know we all have dreamed about what it would be like to visit outer space and experience the excitement of being an astronaut. The thought of going up, up, and away has captured the heart and minds of many. But what does it take to achieve this? Astronauts go through an array of medical and psychological tests. Let's focus on the psychological testing portion of their job. The psychological portion is broken down into aptitude and personality testing. The reason why psychological testing is so important in an astronaut's line of work is that it's important that these individuals can deal well under pressure, long periods of stress, and not sleeping. Astronauts must be efficient, accurate, and able to pay close attention to a task for a long period of time in their line of work. This is why aptitude testing is so important. NASA is attempting to develop testing that will help astronauts perform self-assessments to recognize minimal levels of fatigue while in space. These tests will be especially helpful for the mission to Mars in the near future. The second area of psychological testing is personality testing. There are two more popular personality tests that are used to assess astronauts' personalities. One is the Personal Characteristic Inventory, and the second is the Neo-Personality Inventory. There is some controversy with using these specific personality tests due to a phenomenon called social desirability. Social desirability can be described as faking your personality type by answering the test items in a way that would make the applicant's personalities more hireable for the astronaut position. Although these assessments do have items to help identify whether an applicant is faking their test, studies have shown that this social desirability phenomenon happens more often than not.
Telescopic Topics, a look into the world above us. Stay tuned to KUR for more telescopic topics, and for more information, or to hear this segment again, click on the Telescopic Topics icon on the KUR website at www.kutztown.edu/KUR. Telescopic Topics is a production of the KU Physical Sciences Department and is recorded by KU astronomy students in the studios of KUR. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
It's 12:43 right here on the Tyler Werner Show on Kutztown Radio. Wrapping up the reflection on the Eagles season here, 2013 season. Left off with the December 8th snowy game against the Detroit Lions. Again, the Eagles riding high 8-5 at this point. And then next week, they had to face the Minnesota Vikings, who, you know, were at the bottom of their division, the NFC North. Yeah, I guess many would recognize this game as a trap game when it was all said and done. I mean, the Eagles just didn't seem prepared for this kind of game. You know, I think they just, they came in and it affects you psychologically, I think, as a player and as a team. You know, after the kinds of wins that they had against the Lions and the Cardinals, you know, against teams that were playing well. You know, it's just, I think it was just one of those games that, you know, many people still thought, they should win this game. A lot of people didn't buy into the trap game idea, but, you know, I guess in hindsight, you know, Vikings didn't have Adrian Peterson that game, etc. You know, that's, to me, it was just a write-off game. And, you know, I think that would be made more clear when the next week the Eagles would make mincemeat out of the Chicago Bears. Things were really coming down to the wire for this season at this point. And heading into the Chicago Bears game, they had a chance to wrap up the division if the Cowboys, the Dallas Cowboys, who were, you know, trying to keep pace with the Eagles, if the Cowboys would have lost against the Redskins that week, and the Eagles would have won against the Bears, which they ended up doing, the Eagles would have clinched the NFC East with and essentially, you know, a game to spare at the end of the season against the Cowboys, and essentially, you know, that Cowboys game would have mattered. But, you know, fortunately for the Dallas Cowboys, they managed to beat the sputtering Washington Redskins at that point by the skin of their teeth. And lo and behold, essentially they then made the game in Week 17 against the Eagles matter. Now, this Eagles-Bears game the same day was flexed to the night slot. So essentially, the Eagles knew in advance, they didn't have to win that game. Essentially, the game that was going to matter was going to be the Week 17 showdown against the Dallas Cowboys. And what do the Eagles do? They come out at home and they just blow the Chicago Bears out 54-11. So, I mean, obviously, clearly, they had the Minnesota game in their rear view, and in a game that essentially didn't matter, the Eagles just come out and blow out the Chicago Bears 54-11, having quite a night there. And again, people were questioning the Eagles' defense. How are they going to hold this big receiving core that the Chicago Bears have? Their offense, one of the best, the highest scoring offenses in the league this year. And the Eagles they shut them down, and they put all kinds of points up on the Bears that day. So essentially that brought us to Week 17 against the Dallas Cowboys. Of course, Tony Romo was ruled out this game due to a back injury. And I think this might have played with the Eagles a little bit. The second string quarterback, Kyle Orton, coming out. Kyle Orton has an interesting way of throwing the ball, kind of arcing it over the lineman so that it doesn't get tipped. And at times you could definitely see in this game that the Eagles could have batted the ball, which the Eagles, guys like Connor Barwin, were pretty famous for this season of batting balls like that at the line. But the Eagles never were behind in this game, even though the Cowboys hung with them. And this was last gas for Dallas Cowboys in this game. This was this was a chance to not go 8-8 for a third straight year, etc., and a chance for the Cowboys to win the division, albeit with a 9-7 record. Against an Eagles team that wasn't supposed to win more than 7 games this year, but nevertheless, the Eagles held on in this game, and they beat the Dallas Cowboys 24-22, and this was all gravy. I mean, heading into the playoffs, they had their opportunities against the New Orleans Saints then in that playoff game. But when it all came, when it was all said and done, I mean, the way I looked at it, this is a new regime. We weren't supposed to go 10-6 this season. We weren't supposed to win the NFC East. And people said that the New Orleans Saints heading into that game, they're a weak road team. But then at the end of the day, I mean, it's Drew Brees and Sean Payton, Super Bowl caliber winning team, etc. So when it was all said and done, I wasn't that disappointed that they lost the game, even though the last offensive Eagles drive was Nick Foles leading the Eagles down the field for a touchdown. It was a close game. They had their chances, missed field goal, etc. But when it was all said and done, I'm thinking, next year can definitely be a great season. And, in the weeks to come, we'll definitely talk about that as the scouting combine is around the corner, free agency in March, the draft in April, all this and that. So we'll continue to talk about the future when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles and how this team can move forward in the future and in the years to come. So the obviously I was going to get down to the Flyers, 610-683-4859. The Olympic All-Star break, right, or the Olympic break right now, I should say. Definitely I said a while ago, back in November, how the Flyers had, such a bad start, but since then overall they managed to dig themselves out of that hole and play pretty well. And I think the goaltending has definitely been improved, mostly due to Steve Mason, especially as of late. They've been playing pretty well. Last 4 games, they've been playing very well, especially after a couple weeks ago when they had their Flyers, fight for Wives Carnival the day after a 6-1 loss to the Boston Bruins. I mean, put that in perspective. I mean, you lose 6-1, and then the next day you have a home, you have a big gig at your arena, Flyers Wives Carnival. So, but they bounce back from that in the short term. And again, they're riding a 4-game winning streak heading into the Olympic break. So another few weeks until they have some games. But definitely the thing I want to harp on here is that Claude Giroux was not recruited for Team Canada a little while ago, and that disappointed him. And now recently, Steven Stamkos, one of the best scorers in the league from the Tampa Bay Lightning, was injured and could not participate in this Olympic tournament here for Team Canada. So Steve Yzerman, running the team, is essentially he did not choose Claude Giroux to replace him. He chose Martin St. Louis from the Tampa Bay Lightning. Very, very experienced player. Obviously, he's 38 years old. Still playing at a good level though. So I mean, some people, a lot of Flyer fans are going to look at this like, how could Steve Yzerman not recruit Claude Giroux for this, etc. But I think of it as a good thing to me. I think this, the fact that Giroux was initially disappointed that he wasn't recruited to the team in the first place, and now Stamkos goes down, he can't play for Team Canada. Giroux is not chosen as a replacement. Martin St. Louis. I think this has got to fire up Claude Giroux. Unfortunately, the Flyers riding a hot streak. Now they got to wait to play again for a few weeks due to this break. But I got to think this has got to fire up Claude Giroux. Captain Claude of the Flyers, and hopefully they can ride. They can pick up where they left off in the seat. Before they head into the Olympic break. And again, you have your team captain fired up. I mean, who knows? But at the end of the day, I don't quite think that the Flyers are at a level overall that the Boston Bruins and Pittsburgh Penguins are playing at to make any kind of deep playoff run. But I mean, the way it looks now, I mean, it looks at least they should make the playoffs, and perhaps win a round. I don't know. Maybe move on to the second round and get eliminated. If not, I mean, they weren't in the playoffs last season, so they got new coach Craig Berube. So we'll see. We'll see what they do. But still got a few more weeks for that. Now, lastly, I want to address before we close the show down today. There's this fake article that I don't know if people have seen out there in regards to Michael Vick. That he was supposedly hospitalized after a pit bull attack, and I saw this fake article, on my Facebook stream. When you go to Facebook and you got all kinds of random stuff. The majority of the stuff you don't even care about. But I came upon this fake article. I mean, I saw the title, Michael Vick hospitalized in pit bull attack, and right away I'm just thinking, this is just somebody trying to, satire things, trying to be funny or whatever. But, at this point, it's really stupid to me. Something that Michael Vick did way back, I mean, and then served a punishment for in jail. I mean, in the way he's evolved as a man, on the Philadelphia Eagles organization. And he might not even be on the Eagles next year by the looks of it, as he might find a starting job on another team. But the way I look at it, I mean, if you've been following the Eagles, and following not just Michael Vick's play on the field, but you realize that Michael Vick has really evolved as a human being, and obviously, he did something that couldn't be undone way back. And he served his punishment for it. some people, that's up to you. I mean, some people just can't let that go. They got to still put the dog killer mantra on them and etc. And I'm a dog lover myself, but seeing how Michael Vick has changed and become a pretty decent human being, to me is, it's pretty amazing here in, being a Philadelphia Eagles fan and etc. and talking Philadelphia sports. I respect the way Michael Vick has evolved as a man, but seeing how people still, want to post this kind of stuff, and then seeing, some of the comments on it that, some random Facebook friends, that I don't even know, just having comments on it like, what a disgusting human being, and I mean, come on, that's a little ridiculous at this point. I mean, most casual fans like that, they don't know who Michael Vick really is as a person, at this point, and they still want to bring up something that happened a long time ago that he served a punishment for, and they want to, they really want to rip him and insist that, Michael Vick is still to this day such a disgusting human being, and etc. So, that's my thoughts on that, and it's really a shame that people have to post still have to post jokes like this on Facebook, and that people who don't even really follow football or sports in general just know Michael Vick is this disgusting human being, and look even sillier when they start commenting on a fake article and saying, oh, he got what he deserved, and no, he didn't. It's a fake article. So, joke's on you, I guess. But that'll wrap it up today on the Tyler Werner Show, right here on Kutztown Radio. Thanks for tuning in as always. If next week you want to get on the show, 610-683-4859. And again, the Facebook page, I'll leave with that, facebook.com/Tyler Werner Show. Everybody have a great rest of the week. Stay safe out there in the whatever snowstorms we have once again in the days to come. And if you're going to celebrate it, have a happy Valentine's Day. And we'll talk to you next week, hopefully, if the weather allows. So, take it easy.